Um, okay, thank you for inviting me. In fact, and when I mean inviting, also giving me the time to reflect and the chance to reflect while we are in the process of finalizing this very interesting project, the digital transformation in the Western Balkans educational platform, or what we call Digitresce, a joint initiative of many academic institutions, but also research institutions. And I would like to thank also Carlos for putting in place this beautiful consortium, but also you leading the side of Barleti, our university. So the overall concept of the platform was to investigate innovative methodologies for digitalization, but not only the process of education in creative industries. And of course, creative industries is a wide spectrum of many disciplines that correlate and join together in order to create and, of course, shape a common understanding of how we think, in my understanding at least, the interaction between creative models. When we talk about creative models, it's not only creative models of different artistic or digital practices, which we have been investigating, but also creative models on how we even perceive simple concepts or concepts that we think or we understand as strict narratives. And two of these very strict concepts, which also the title of my presentation today has, is space and time. There are two concepts and notions which we find every day in our lives present. Even today, speaking to you at 3:03 p.m. Tirana time. But in fact, space is time, and space is in time is the title of this discussion, because it's very important to understand in the development process of Western Balkans, but also the Mediterranean, I would say, lake, thinking of the close relationships between our countries and the Mediterranean cultures transitioning from Asia until Western Europe, linking also Germany, linking also Netherlands and many other countries together with the overall Mediterranean Sea and countries neighboring, is also our common or not common sense of space and time. And Albania, as a country which has been developed quite rapidly in the last 35 years in a transition period, as we call, sometimes these notions are not very much linked, neither to urban and architectural development, neither to creative industries development, which seem to have a quantum leap the last years, but also the relationship that people, not only students, but also citizens, have with these two elements, space and time. And let's start from the most obvious and the most easy to quantify in terms, not only because we have watches, but because we think that we value also our movement in space through time, on what is time. I would like to shortly read you a small extract from Peter Zumthor's Atmosphere book. It's a small essay that Zumthor tries to understand the relationship of people with time. And he presents it in this way. It's a Mori Thursday, 2003. Here I am sitting in the sun, a grand arcade long, tall, beautiful in the sunlight. The square offers me a panorama, the facades of houses, the church, the monuments. Behind me is the wall of a cafe, just the right number of people, a flower market. Sunlight, 11 o'clock, the opposite side of the square, in the shade, pleasantly blue, wonderful range of noises. Conversations nearby, footsteps in the square. On stone, birds, a gentle murmuring from the crowd, no cars, no engine sounds. So what moved me? Everything. The things themselves, the people, the air, noises, sound, colors, material presences, textures, and forms too. Forms I can appreciate, forms I can try to decipher. Forms I find beautiful. What else moved me? My mood, my feelings, the sense of expectation that filled me while I was sitting there, which brings the famous Platonic sentence to mind. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, meaning it is all in me. But then I perform an experiment. I take away the square, and my feelings are not the same. An elementary experiment, certainly. Please excuse the simplicity of my thinking. I remove the square and my feelings disappear. I could never have had those feelings without the atmosphere of the square. It's quite logical, really. People interact with objects. As an architect, that is what I deal all the time. So with this sense of Zumthor trying to investigate his relationship in accordance to time, but of course in accordance to space, is somehow a clear and a definitive action to place a shape around things, to give a clear definition, to process from abstract thinking into geometry, into geometrical Euclidean forms that could give a sense and could perceive a sense of structure, of transforming chaos into order, or into deciphering a very complex system, a very complex problem into simple and more quantitative, easy to measure tasks. Tasks that could be later, let's say, handled one by one. In our discipline, in the creative process disciplines, we often consider that creative industries, such as creative thinking, design, architecture, multimedia, creative processes are somehow independent on the way we think, but also on the way we realize things. And what is important is to understand that Zumthor himself positions himself in space according also to time, and the time that he is able to measure things is counted by the movement of the sun. So a very important element that we as architects also aim, think, perceive when we first start to design things. But what happens when today, in the era of digital transformation, in the era of AI technologies and interaction, we are not able anymore to perceive the presence of sun, and we have just the presence of time as a quantitative method, as we mentioned before. But in fact, in our methodological processes during the last years at Barleti University, we tried to deconstruct the architectural design process and somehow re-understand what Zumthor thinks in his short essay we read before, the presence of time, the presence of space, a common denominator giving the link between those things, in the case the sun, and what is the value of natural daylight, what is the value of the architectural atmosphere which natural sunlight, and as a result artificial light later on, can give to a particular space. Somehow can form a square without the need of the square. And per se, the square is the logical structure of order. While on the other side, time will link with the notion of transforming a space, not from outside, not from the notion of placing a square and then infusing the square with interior spaces, fitting our living habitats inside a predefined square. We developed a methodology in order to start transforming, start our inspirational process while thinking from the interior of the space, extending towards exterior, without even thinking the exterior as a mere skin, but in the end, the skin, the exterior, is the result of the health, is the result of the sanity of the living organs of the inside of the house. This might sound a bit complex, might sound a bit weird also, but in the end, the start of the process of humans creating living habitats never had in consideration at the starting point how the house, how the square would look from outside. That came later on as a process of valuing the aesthetic components of the inside, leaving out the living qualities, but embracing rather formal aspects of the of architecture. So going back a bit, thinking on how we can reshape, how can we re-understand the cave, and how can we shape the cave with the notion of the sun as a component of time, but also of the sun as a component of the moment that we start our day, we start life when the sun rises, and the moment that we end life when the sun sets. So it's somehow a living process within a living process. And our aim here was to release the students of having the constraints of a particular context place when we start the design, and rather give them an inspirational point in the values of atmospheric space. To make it more clear for you, and you will see later on, it's not so difficult to find inspiration in a concrete way while designing interior spaces. And it's more easier when we try to think on those spaces, considering the word atmosphere as the key word to unlock all the hidden meanings that we're gonna experiment later. In this case, we have a painting, an interior painting by a very well-known Spanish painter, Diego Velázquez, which is called, of course, Las Meninas. So many of you have seen it not only on the internet, but some of you have maybe visited the Prado Museum in Madrid to see it in person. And this painting and many other paintings presenting interior space and architectural atmosphere, presenting the sense of time and space, the sun, and the vast and the vague walls that are enclosed in this painting and many more, have been used the last years in a laboratory of architectural design in order to be the starting points of inspiration in order to design in the future a living space, a house for a single family. So what about this picture? Why is it being presented to you now? This picture has also a very emotional meaning and connection with myself. Is maybe the painting, one of the first paintings I learned also how to draw in architecture, how to think about shadows, how to think about light. And of course, Velázquez is a master of light in this painting, presents himself painting an enclosed space, an interior room, a room which also presents members of the royal family of Spain. So this painting, created in the end of the 17th century, finds Velázquez at the time, at the space in time, present to be the, let's say, the chief of guard of the royal palace of the Spanish king. And of course, as he had this key authoritarian position, of course, he helped a lot to evolve creative industries in Spain at the time. So painting, music, and other components that were important. Himself was not a painter with a huge artistic work. He painted almost only 100 paintings, which is not so much for a painter of his caliber and his position, as you might think. But what is very important of Velázquez, and this painting is a resemblance, is his positioning of space and time. We mentioned before that this painting is one of the paintings that students will use and use at Barleti to find inspiration in order to initiate a design process, and how this happens. As students will try to understand the presence of this painting as not only a painting, but as an architectural space, as a room, as a house, as a living habitat, which, as our spaces today, react with sunlight, interact with it, process themselves. You can find beams, structural columns, ceilings, walls, floors, windows, doors, stairs sometimes. You can find, with the connection of the natural sunlight, not only and see the presence of the space we see in the painting, but you can imagine, you can experiment, you can speculate all the other architectural spaces, proportions, sizes, building elements that might be in the space where the painting is created from. And here the creative process of students starts. So the students are asked to draw this space, to draw beyond the painting, to draw exactly the architectural room, spaces where we are present, to draw spaces on the left, spaces on the right, spaces on the point of the observer as we are looking at it now, and of course spaces in the depth of the field of the painting. And their strongest weapon to attack this problem is the relationship of the space with the natural sunlight. As you see on the right side of the painting, but also on the back side, you see the entrance, the point of entrance of the sunlight in the room. So we might be able to understand where is the position of the sun at that point. We have the proportion of men, the proportion of building elements as doors and windows, and we can see and understand a relative presence of height and depth of the room. And of course, as the location of each single individual, furnitures and other decorative elements, we can again perceive a clearer space, a space which has height, which has depth, which has length, a space which has a particular function, and a way which we can try to recreate almost exactly the same space, which can serve as the modular element to construct a new space. And all of that with the first and stronger point, the relationship of this space in time in relation with the sun. Talking a bit about what also Zumthor said. So why am starting this conversation with you, presenting also this painting, this particular painting in this exercise? Why I'm not using other paintings? Because in fact, this painting has also a particular metaphorical relation of space and time. This is one of the most famous paintings of Diego Velázquez, and of course this painting is called Las Meninas, while in fact the main figure in relationship with the sun might seem to be the small daughter, young daughter of the Spanish king at the time. In fact, we have also a chronological reference, 1656, which we can understand also the age that the young princess had at the time. But also there is a particular speculation because the title of the painting is called Las Meninas. So Las Meninas in this case is not the name of the princess, is not the name of the royal family. Las Meninas, the painting is dedicated exactly to the members, different servants, different guards, different representatives of the royal court of the king. So somehow a dedication, an heterotopic dedication of Velázquez, of the painting to everyone presenting, surrounding the royal palace, everyone also part of the creative industries of the palace. The painting in particular puts the viewer, us at this moment, in a particular position because somehow, along this architectural atmosphere, we are in the same point, the observer and the observant, and the person that we are being observed to. Because as the positioning of the figurines, persons in the painting, we are somehow being observed. It seems that we are also part of the discussion. Maybe we are the painting, we are the atmosphere that the protagonists are looking to. In fact, as you see also the depth of the field, the young princess in the front, different animals, different servants following a nun, a priest, and another guard in the end of the corridor, presenting this distance in length, but also the difference in height, and of course stairs moving towards the left with the sun on the position of the south. We also have another interesting element which empowers the heterotopic relationship of the painting with us, the viewer. We have Velázquez himself. Velázquez himself is present in this picture. You will see it later more in detail. Velázquez present in the picture with a huge canvas board that he's painting. It seems that, again, this placement of space and time, if being analyzed more in detail, Velázquez is already painting. He's painting, and himself is being present in another painting. And what is Velázquez present to paint is somehow us that we're watching him. In fact, the articulation of space, and what also students understand, is the presence of the mirror. A mirror which in fact presents two more new figures in the group of personalities that are part of this space. The king and the queen, at the same time, being painted by Velázquez. So, itself, this painting has a different main actor and actress, the king and the queen, presented through a mirror. It has different points to observe depth, to observe space, to observe the resemblance and the articulation of atmosphere in this painting, in this space. We have different figurines in the long depth. We have the painting, the canvas as present of this dichotomy of articulations. We have the points of entrance of natural sunlight, and we have, of course, the supporting actors, but also the young princess part of this painting. It's, of course, a very beautiful painting, and in fact, is even more interesting while thinking that Velázquez is part of this painting himself. And here is another tricky part. So, among all these different meanings of information, of space, of atmospheres, of natural sunlight, of historical figures, Velázquez goes to place himself in the painting and goes to bend the rules of space and time even more. So Velázquez here, what he does is that he paints himself in the painting, while painting himself, adding an even more interesting detail in his chest, which is the cross of night. So the cross of night, which is given to knights, knighted by a king, is a component which historically was not present in Velázquez's life in 1656 when he painted this painting, and that also can be accounted by the age of the young princess at the time, but also could go in a contradiction on the year when Velázquez became a knight in 1658. So 2 years after this painting. So Velázquez himself even imposes to the king not only the presence of his knighthood, but imposes the fact that he already represents himself as a knight even before being knighted by him. This is a more not only fun historical fact, but it's also a way for inspiration and as a methodology and tool for students not to understand only the structural components of the painting, but also the value of the artistic representation of the painting itself. So imagine architects, which are even more now linked with art, architects that are investigating light at the starting point of a design process, architects which deal with historical figures and try to understand the values of cultural inter-exchange, not only in Spain in the 1700s, but in the Netherlands in the 18th century, in France in 1600s, in many, many other countries along Europe, where these paintings come from and where we see an interdisciplinary connection between an artistic inspiration form that could be transformed into an architectural prototype. Enough with this investigation of artistic interventions, because there are many of them, and we can see some of them later on. But let's see some examples of how students are able to transform this space and go into their interpretation, go into further modeling, create drawings, create plans, create sections, create collages, and try to recreate the atmosphere through collages. So imagine the former space that Velázquez presented to us, transformed with the same proportions into a new architectural space, into a space which has a clear strong element of attraction in the interior, but also has a clear way of reflection of the natural daylight and also depth of field in the way that the presence of the atmosphere in Velázquez's painting can be transmitted in this small model. And as this example, I would like to go further into taking a bit more into understanding what is the importance of time and space for us. Couple of centuries after Velázquez, this was the way that we were used to represent art, that we used to represent reality, hyperrealism. So in a sense of presenting architecture, getting inspiration from artistic mediums, this is how, in one part of the world, and Severine Rosen is an example here, artists used to depict life, used to depict atmospheres, used to depict objects and the way that people were living. In the same continent, few kilometers apart, we have the first presence of the photograph. So arts are achieved at this last point, presenting exactly, or in the more realistic way, natural or still life. And on the other time, we have from a French scientist, a French chemist, we have the first photograph, the view from the window at the grass. And this shows somehow a gap that science fills with the invention of photography. A gap that art took almost 18 centuries to achieve into creating realistically objects, while the photograph has just started to create a new paradigm. And a few years later, exactly after the invention of photography, we start with the exploration of other ways of connecting time, not as a static moment of photography, as in painting, but to connect time as a sequence of movements and sequence of spaces and their formation or deformation along time. We have the galloping force, a very interesting experiment by Edward Muybridge, and this is another moment of paradigm. So we are able now to depict the transformation of space in time. That goes even more long. We have Piero Mondrian, a very particular artist known for his landscapes, for his many landscapes in the Dutch territories. He's now experimenting with the art of abstraction. So he's trying somehow to transform the way of depicting a tree into different forms, and in the end he tries to place a square in order to re-give structure to that painting. And of course, as we know, the invention of the famous Destil and very famous compositions by Mondrian later on. So in a very short period, we were able to abstract components that we took almost 1800 years or even more to make realistic. And in this fact, art becomes abstraction, and then abstraction becomes a sense of urban space, and this ends with the famous plan of Brooklyn by Mondrian. This abstraction, which in fact made architects like Le Corbusier, like Mies van der Rohe, like Walter Gropius, and so on, to create even another paradigm of using technology at this time, mass production, mass construction, the invention of concrete as a cheap element, to create structures, machines of living, to incorporate together in one single vessel, one single big ship, spaces for sleeping, spaces for working, spaces for cultural activities, and spaces for education. This is the roof terrace of the Université d'Habitation in Marseille, where René Bourri took one of the most interesting shots, children playing in their kindergarten time in the rooftop of a ship of living, Université d'Habitation, built by Le Corbusier. In the same time, We have a contrast with Allison and Peter Smithson, where in the famous Siam conference in 1953, they go against this transformation of modernism as a way to give concrete spaces to our cities, giving a new character, a new atmosphere away from nature, and expanding on that, their provocation, games and landscapes. Here comes as a protest, as a form of protest to showcase that children, no matter what kind of space you will give them, they will always want to go back to their games. Of course, they will reappropriate the public space, they will find a way to build a playground out of nothing, but in fact, children should be playing. And the disconnection of places that children should be playing, which is parks, natural spaces, with these vast concrete surfaces that modernism gave, or the bad translation to modernism. We've talked a lot about time, and maybe we can talk a bit more about space. So, as we are trying to investigate different ways of how time is being perceived in this discussion, is the human dimension that creates a particular definition. This etymological definition of space and time, in fact, belongs to the different relationships between the fields which time and space are related. In regards to architecture or even creative industries, space is perceived through a visual, a tangible and an emotional approach. We saw the case of atmospheres, we saw the case of a clear plan, we saw the case of the process of making something very concrete or something very abstract into something very tangible. Bashgard's fact points a very interesting perspective that for our house is our corner of the world. As has often been said, it is our first universe, a real cosmos in every sense of the word. And in fact, this is why we started the investigation on developing an idea for students or for young architects to design a house, a single family house, from this artistic perspective, to inspire themselves from existing atmospheres, coming from artistic notions, artistic derivatives, but even from real experiences. And here we have Luis Barragan, a very famous Mexican architect, which he designed his own house, Casa Barragan, a house which is, of course, very much not in contradiction, but is somehow two sides of the same personality, the same person, the same living space, the exterior of his house and the interior of his house. So in the end, no matter how much Barragan aims and wants to create human-made landscapes in the exterior spaces of the house, in the yards, in the corridors, in the roof terrace, in other particular moments, or in long corridors to anticipate movement, in the end, of course, he tries to embrace those atmospheres even in the interior space. So it's not a matter of material, concrete or not. It's not a matter of wood, metal. It's not a matter of marble and stone, but it's a matter of the depiction of a living space, particularly a house, as a series of scenographic movements inside of it, as an orchestration of atmospheres inside the house, which of course they can have a clear artistic inspiration, but also they can have inspiration from memories, from the young years of a childhood, from trips, from visits, and from this small collection of memoirs as card postals presented in space. This is how and what students are doing. So they are transforming paintings from different authors. We have Edward Hopper in one of the cases. We have several authors which deal with the sense of space and atmosphere and the relationship with daylight. and how all of these authors are being understood for their qualitative space values. And those paintings are transformed into possible inspirations for new spaces in the future. So imagine as this creative process, as somehow some kind of an osmosis process where artistic interventions, natural interventions, daylight, time, space, and atmosphere are blended together, and they are able to create a new atmospheric perception. This atmospheric perception, of course, cannot come only from painting, can come from the film industry, from movies, from photographs, from scenes, from collages also, that resemble, that carry, that they are able to transmit emotion. So the presence of the human in all of these paintings, in all of these scenographic narratives from films and photographs, are those embodied narratives that we should make up for those spaces. Are the stories that we are able to be inspired from, and that we are able to recreate new stories for them in the future. So imagine the possibility of transforming something not tangible, an atmosphere, into narratives, and those narratives could be transformed through the dimension of life into new spaces. And we would be able to transform those atmospheres into a clear alphabet of life, according to each atmosphere, each emotion, in each perception that we have in those spaces. And this is exactly the result of this creative process, the result of this new methodology, where, in fact, again, the skin of the building is not at all important, but is the perception of the inside organs of the space, so important that it's able to transform its interior and its exterior totally, only by keeping the human as the center point of our design process. So this design thinking process creates, of course, even exterior spaces, facades, structural components, entrances, hallways, getaways, and so on. But in fact, all those components on the exterior are almost never being accounted for until the ending point, because at the ending point, those components of the exterior are aesthetic, are functional, and are of value because they are a result of the interior. So somehow this blind way of designing from inside to outside without knowing what's going to happen in the end is much more a controlled process than a non-controlled process, because every interior space comes as a result of the interaction with the human that inhabits it, infused by an artistic process, and then, of course, the level of functionality in accordance with the atmosphere that is created in one by one of those spaces, which develops sequentially from one space to the other, creating all elements we need to live, is what transforms and makes this abstract process into a more concrete architectural design process with tangible results. But in fact, it's very important to infuse ourselves in this artistic dimension. It's very important to place students and ourselves as educators in this rabbit hole of interventions, in this rabbit hole of interactions between time and space, in order sometimes to find unpredictable results, which not only connect time and space, but also link with the natural habitat, link with the terrain, link with the context where we are designing to, link with the orientation of the natural sunlight, and we link also with the character of the person that lives inside it. So these are all the results of the design process, which never thinks from outside, but always thinks from inside to out. And this process is able to create a sequential development through series experimentations, which can be controlled in the end, which can provide built results, and which can give also valid and sane constructive components. What is very important in this interaction between creative industries, architecture, and later on more strict sciences into construction, built environment, and so on, is the level of interaction, the level of course, dedication of the design process to the architectural atmosphere of the interior, which is the leading actor in the whole understanding of space. We started with this painting as a clear definition of a play between time and space by Velázquez himself, but also as a clear inspiration point where our understanding of time and space can be transformed into new methodologies for design, into new methodologies for inspiration, exactly finding the right time and the right space to start this creative process, from inside to outside. This was my intervention in this process as a way to link closer scientific disciplines such as the built environment, engineering, construction, architecture, but also interior design and so on, together with processes which can seem abstract, can seem not placed in a square, but sometimes the square doesn't need to be rigid. The square is just the logical understanding that we give to abstract notions, and in this time and space are as well logical, but also they both bend. Thank you.
You showed the Las Niñas de Velázquez, the picture, and we were used until a certain moment to actually be accustomed to see this in 2D, right? So we have a 2D space, which is a painting. Of course, this 2D painting represents a 3D space. So this is a sort of our own process of converting these fictional spaces into 3D. So it was our job. But right now we are seeing this new technology that actually allows you to create 3D spaces from 2D paintings and even from 2D photographs. How do you see this conceptual process of design is going to change, because it's sort of becoming easy to actually make this transition between 2D and 3D? How do you see this is going to affect the actual design process?
Well, thank you for the question. It's very relevant also to our everyday way of thinking. I mean, this methodology was developed exactly with the purpose of trying to give students a new dimension of thinking, and trying to also put in question that maybe most of our existing living spaces are not of the quality they should be in order for us to be healthy, to be inspired. And as a result of the interior spaces, maybe the city is not beautiful, is not healthy, because we should start from the inside rather than outside. So, on the other hand, of course, we are living now in a new paradigm, which has moved into a new again paradigm. Maybe we have skipped the VR, augmented reality point, or we haven't started yet, in the sense that there were always, even in that paradigm, many things to explore. But as we see artificial intelligence, which is able to create from an image different perspectives of a space, let's not forget that artificial intelligence is not able to give us the exact logical way of its thinking to create that 2D to 3D. And maybe in the future it will be able to. But the notion and the sense not only of design and also architectural design, but also of art, does not fall behind an abstract, and not only abstract, but I will remove the words abstract, and not structured way of creating. Because art is a structured way of developing an artwork. No matter if it's painting, no matter if it's the film industry, music, and so on. So, after all, there is syntax in all the artistic forms, real artistic forms that we are used to. And syntax requires structure, requires a clear understanding of what you're doing. And if we will start to use those artificial intelligence based models to design, to architecture, to do other things in creative industries, with this sense of depth in them, then we should be able to master the tool. Because in the end, this is again a new tool. Velasquez had a paintbrush. Now we have computers to design, or used to have pen and pencils, paper and pencils. This would be a new tool. So there are already colleagues, many of us, Gerdy himself, and so on, also globally many, that are already using AI to structure and to optimize controlled developed processes. We started in the early 90s with algorithmic design, script-based design, and many other forms. And this today is a new way to supercharge that tool, to make it work faster, make it work smarter. But in the end, if this will not enter in a creative process, it will not be a valid design. It will be a design that in the end will never be able to replace the architect, the artist, the designer, but should be something to be perceived as a tool, and it will be a tool. Okay, the worst case scenario maybe could be that the AI will replace us as creatives. But I think that rather than being afraid of the tools, it's better to start mastering them, start investigating them, start experimenting with them, and maybe we create better tools also ourselves, rather than being afraid, or rather than giving control into the Skynet. Because I think that it's up to us to regulate that.